Well, the 2028 presidential election is already getting big names, sparking huge interest from big names in the Democrat Party. One of those names that is showing a lot of interest in a Democrat ticket in 2028 is current Minnesota Governor and former vice presidential loser Tim Walz. So in this video, we are going to be looking at whether Walz is actually planning on running in 28, what his actual plans are. Is he just trying to stay relevant after the 2024 loss? Is he going to run in 26 for re-election? Is he going to run in 28? Because after his role as Kamala Harris's running mate, Tim Walz has been making some serious moves that raise questions about his next step. They're definitely leaning towards a 2028 presidential run in the Democrat primary. But we're going to look at what the likelihood to see what Tim Walz would look like on a presidential ballot in 2028. And the reality is that Walz has been very, very open about his consideration for a run in 2028. In March of 2025, in an interview with the New Yorker, he said that, quotes, he would certainly consider running if he felt that the time was right. If he felt the time was right, he would definitely consider. And he's careful with his word in saying that he's not really driven by his own ambition, but he could offer something new to the country he would step in, which is a total load of horse crap. This is totally about him. You don't run for president to serve other people. You just don't. I'm sorry. You run for president for yourself. And he says, only if he feels that he could offer something new to the country, he would step in. And really tries to emphasize this public service comes first, not this personal ambition, which is just, like we said, a load of horse manure. It's totally... It's just not reality, especially the reality at that level. Okay, can you make the case maybe at a smaller level? City council, state senator, state representative, maybe governor, maybe. But no, you get into politics for those reasons, but you don't stick around in politics for those reasons. At least not this guy. His response shows that he is not ruling it out, but is taking a wait-and-see approach. And it is clear that Walz has not made up his mind yet, but is leaving the door open for a future presidential bid, because after the 2024 presidential election, Tim Walz did not just disappear from the political stage, not like Kamala Harris. Kamala's just disappeared. She is MIA. No, she's just gone AWOL. Meanwhile, Tim Walz has actually been actively involved in some national outreach programs. It's like he's, for as much as I dislike him and dislike his policies, he actually has been doing sort of the right things post-2024. He launched a national town hall tour focusing on connecting with voters in more Republican-held districts. These are places like Iowa, Nebraska, Ohio, Wisconsin, which are going to be key battlegrounds for Tim Walz's, not only his effort in the primary. You think about Iowa, you think about New Hampshire in a primary, but you also fast forward to a general election. If he were to get to a general election, or whoever that Democrat is, who is the nominee in 2028, they're going to have to win support there. They're going to have to, shrink the margin in places like Nebraska, places like Ohio. They're going to have to win places like Wisconsin and really make Iowa a true battleground state. And right now, these events that he's holding are aimed at discussing, healthcare reform and veterans issues and job creation in these more Republican conservative areas, which do vie well with Republicans, but ultimately it's not conservatives who are coming out to these rallies. These are liberals who are in deep red pockets of the country who are coming out to this. It's not like this is some mass outreach effort to conservatives. No, you're reaching liberals in red-leaning districts. Let's be honest about this. But these town halls are not just some local events that are kind of strung together. This is a part of a larger strategy to build Tim Walz's national profile and test his appeal with a larger and more broad audience. By reaching out to either what he considers Republicans, moderates, or Democrats in these more ruby red districts, Walz is showing that he could actually be making a serious consideration for a nationwide run. We know that Tim Walz would never do that well. He was in Congress, because, when Tim Walz was in Congress, he basically said, nope, we don't do town halls anymore. So, it's kind of funny. The guy who stopped, the original guy who stopped doing town halls is now the guy who's going around trying to lecture us in Republican districts on why they're not doing town halls, because you have paid agitators who come to these town halls. Like we said, they're paid agitators, and they agitate. They make noise. That's what they do. There is no serious discussion about policy issues. There isn't. It all has to do with these paid agitators going in there and making noise. That's what it is. Because Walz has been positioning himself as someone who can, bridge this divide between the parties, which I think is kind of a little BS. I think he tries to play himself as this much more moderate candidate when he is actually a decent amount more left. He is more like the populist left, if and he believes vast social programs, just stuff that, by and large, people who, like myself, who believe in limited and smaller government just are not a fan of at all. We're just not. But he is not campaigning yet. We know that. These moves trying to keep him in the conversation as a potential 2028 candidate while not explicitly jumping in the 2028 race. Because his national visibility is on the rise, especially in these battleground states where his presence could shift the political dynamic in the 2028 Democrat primary. Because he's engaging directly with voters in swing states and even Republican states, which positions him much more as a potential centrist candidate for 2020 than the more left-wing candidate or left-wing governor that he was. It's like he was kind of like the Timu, California governor. He was the Timu version of Gavin Newsom. That's what this guy was. If you actually look at how he governed in the state of Minnesota, talking about sanctuary for illegal immigrants, a sanctuary city, talking about rampant crime It is just broke out in Minneapolis like there's no tomorrow. We're talking about tampons in boys' bathrooms, complete denial of biological realities, complete denial of it. Try to make the claim that there is no correlation or connection between sex and gender. There isn't. That gender is just this idea that's just floating off in space that isn't tethered to anything else. It is just something completely made up by human beings. You look, he pushed some of the most radical social programs in the state of Minnesota. We went from having an $18 billion surplus in the state of Minnesota to now we're projected to have like a $4 or $5 billion deficit in the next couple of years due to the vast social programs. How lax they have had on allowing people on Medicaid in the state or MNsure in the state. He passed, universal school lunch. And now they're trying to pry away millions and millions and millions of dollars from private charter schools that this was additional funding that went to them. Now, nope, he's trying to pry all of that money away from them to all go to the public schools, completely controlled by the teacher union. But this idea is definitely to test his political viability by engaging with these other constituents around the country that he would need to win in order to be the nominee, in order to be president. He would need to do that because there are a lot of people who are skeptical. He will be forever associated with the losing 2024 campaign. Because the reality is, it is going to be very, very hard for him to lose that not loser mentality, but that loser, that's how people see him. They see him as this very weak vice presidential candidate. They didn't even think he was the number one choice, and maybe even the number two choice. He was like number 3 or number 4 choice. He didn't help Harris win at all in the swing states. You want to look at what they spent $1.5 billion in 2024, and this is what they got. They lost all 7 swing states, and they lost the popular vote by about a little under 2 percentage points. Okay, Harris won Minnesota by a little closer margin than Clinton won it in 2016, but also you didn't have 3 other candidates on the ballot that took away almost 6% of the vote. So it's like, you could even say that just because it was Trump and Harris on the ballot, that just for those reasons, and there wasn't all these additional candidates, Gary Johnson, Jill Stein, they were on the ballot, but they just didn't get as much votes as they did back in 2016. Well, look at this. It's like we're talking about expanding his victory of margin in all 3 of these states here. Well, maybe not all 3. Actually, all 3. He expanded his margin of victory in all 3 of the blue wall states. He didn't win as big as he needed to in Georgia or North Carolina, but look at this. He flipped Nevada. Nevada was not it's like it was close by 2 percentage points, just like New Hampshire, very close. But, okay, you were able to pad your margin in some of these states, but look at this. Look at California. California, 20% for Harris. Look at this. Biden got 30%. Go back to 2012. Obama got 23. Go back to Clinton. She got 30. 30. Go back to 2008. Obama got 24. Look at New York. New York, 26. 28. 22. 23. And then 12. Look at New Jersey. Under 6 points. Biden won this state by almost 16 points before. Clinton won it by 14 in 2016. Talk about something that is a really left-leaning state that has been shifting much more to the right. But like we said, this all has to do with it's testing his political viability. Is he a viable candidate in the primary? Is he? Could he be a viable candidate if he continues to lay the groundwork for a strong presidential run? Could he be a viable candidate? And if he succeeds in these outreach efforts, I expect him to start laying some of the groundwork for a presidential run in 2028. Now, Walz has acknowledged that the 2024 campaign did not go as planned. It didn't go as planned. We shouldn't have been playing things too safe, is what he said. Walz said the campaign's risk-averse approach was a byproduct of the brief 107-day campaign. And, this is where they're at. That campaign did not go as they planned, specifically when it came to the Harris-Walz ticket. Because down ballot, we saw that Democrats actually performed halfway decent down ballot. At the top of the ticket, though, it was horrible. It was truly horrible. Look at this. The Democrats down ballot did good in Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, Arizona. They did very good. You look at some of these House districts that were flipped. And let's see, you look at California. California 27, California 13. You go down here, California 45. California 45. These were flipped by the Democrats. You go to New York, you look at this. Democrats flipped New York 22, New York 19, New York 3, and 4. They held on to some of these closer Democrat seats here. So down ballot, Democrats did not do horrible in the state. They didn't. Yes, did Republicans pick up? Of course they picked up. But at the end of the day, they did a lot better down ballot than most people would have expected. Just being 100% honest. And the self-awareness, I think Tim Walz is, like I said, one of the few people in the Democrat Party who is willing to look in the mirror and say, hey, we did something wrong. I feel like Tim and Gavin Newsom, maybe Pete Buttigieg, but most of the party, leadership in the party, no. They don't want to learn from past mistakes. They don't believe their mistakes. And it's if someone wants to win a presidential election, this is essential for them. This is essential that they really consider how they really screwed up in 2024. And, maybe he could funnel all of that energy and engagement into a campaign in 28, because it will be necessary. If he decides to run, it will be necessary to funnel all of that support, all of that engagement into actual voters. Because that was one of the biggest misses from the Democrats in 2024, was their failure to engage with voters in person during the 2024 campaign. They didn't engage with voters where they were at. Donald Trump was going to where they were at. He was going on podcasts. Where was his core demographic? He was going on podcasts. He was going on young, male-oriented podcasts that are receiving millions and millions and millions of views every single day. And, Democrats, maybe their voters aren't in those same places, in those same spaces, on those same shows, but ultimately, they still need to appeal to a lot of those same voters that Trump needed to appeal to. But there's still a lot to say here. We need to know, is Tim Walz going to run in 2026 in the gubernatorial election? We just don't know. He could run for a third term. We don't know. As of right now, he has not announced. He's said that he might, but we don't have a definitive answer in what's going to happen with the governor's race, which I think, similar to Kamala Harris, it could be a binary option. I think having a governorship could really tie you down when it comes to 2026 or 2028. So maybe he decides not to run. Maybe he decides that he's going to put all of his focus into 2028. Maybe that's what it is. But ultimately, Walz is one of these bigger names that's being floated in 2028. But he's not the only Democrat in consideration. But let's just acknowledge reality that 6 months ago, Tim Walz's name would have been nowhere near a 2028 presidential campaign or Democrat nominee discussion. He would have been nowhere near it. You'd be looking at other people like Andy Beshear, Pete Buttigieg, Roy Cooper, Kamala Harris, Gavin Newsom, AOC, Josh Shapiro, J.B. Pritzker. But I do think that in a primary, maybe not in a general election, but I think he has a lot of credibility in a Democrat primary, especially when it comes to the more populist wing of the party, because Tim Walz did execute. Whether you like him or not, he executed on what his policy positions were with small margins. In Minnesota, he had a trifecta for 2 years. He pushed through some of the most radical left-wing agenda policy items that we've seen in Minnesota in decades. Like we said, tampons in boys' bathrooms. Eliminating a $18 billion deficit through ridiculous social spending on these social safety nets, which are just ridiculous. But that's a lot of brownie points with the more populist portion of the party that actually wants to see people doing things. They want to see policy turn in, on paper. They want pen on paper. But ultimately, the Democrat field will be crowded in 2028. So Walz is going to have to contend with a lot of big-known, well-funded figures like Newsom, like AOC, like Whitmer, like Shapiro, like Kamala Harris, which he's definitely been put in a lot of distance, a lot of daylight. Something Kamala Harris couldn't do with her boss. But it seems Tim Walz has no issue putting some daylight between himself and Kamala Harris. And, this tour going nationwide could give him an edge in connecting with certain voters outside of the Democrat base, or just, not creating his support with inside the Democrat base, but like cementing some support within the Democrat base. Because maybe the Democrat base didn't want him. Maybe now they will. Maybe they're going to look at him, and it's like we can see in Poland right now, it's like he's polling somewhere around 5%. For a pretty crowded primary, that's not too bad. And I think only with time, because we really didn't get to know the true Tim Walz in 2024. We just didn't. But he is definitely trying to position himself as a centrist who can appeal to both a liberal and moderate voter, which is crucial for an election bid, but just isn't reality. The guy isn't a centrist. He's not. He can't appeal to more moderate voters. It's like maybe a little bit, but he just doesn't have that appeal. But in conclusion, Tim Walz has not officially declared his candidacy in 2028, but his actions definitely suggest that this is something he's keeping his options open here, focusing on national outreach and refining his message, from 2024, making the tweaks or the major policy overhauls that he didn't agree with from 2024, which is definitely seen by many as laying the groundwork for a future campaign. And his focus on, this willingness to learn from the past on certain things shows that he actually may be a formidable candidate in 2028, that he'll be ready to take on these other candidates. And, we're going to see. As the election cycle moves forward, keep an eye on Walz. He may be a key player come 2028. He may be. He may be a key player when it comes to it. But the Democrat field is still taking shape, and Walz has clearly positioned himself as trying to be a serious contender who's not afraid to shake things up. We're going to see if that lasts. I have a hard time seeing it last. We'll see if it lasts. But that's going to wrap things up for today, folks. Drop down below, hit that subscribe button. Make sure you never miss another video from us again in the future. And let me know your thoughts. What do you think about Tim Walz? Do you think he should be the nominee? Do you think he should run in 2028? Do you think he should run in 26 for re-election? Let me know your thoughts.